Jaxon Harrison was a man who seemed to have it all. As the CEO of one of the most influential tech companies in the United States, he was the embodiment of confidence and power. At just 35 years old, he had amassed a fortune that most could only dream of. Luxury mansions scattered across the most exclusive neighborhoods, a fleet of high-end sports cars, and an entourage of people who constantly vied for his attention and approval. To Jaxon, life was a strategic game of power and control, and he was the undisputed champion. One Saturday afternoon, however, Jaxon found himself in an unlikely setting for someone of his status, the local McDonald's. To him and his circle of affluent friends, it was a humorous diversion, a chance to play at living an ordinary life, if only for a brief moment. Seated around a table at the back of the bustling restaurant, they joked and laughed, but as usual, Jaxon was the center of attention. "You've really done it all, Jaxon," Jacob Turner remarked, his voice carrying a mix of admiration and playful challenge as he bit into his burger. "You've conquered business, outsmarted rivals, and gotten everything you ever wanted, but I doubt you can win this next bet." Jackson's interest was piqued. He leaned back, a confident smirk playing on his lips. "Oh, go on then, I'm listening." Jacob's eyes gleamed mischievously as he set the trap he had carefully planned. "I bet you can't marry a woman who's the complete opposite of everything in our world. And I don't mean a model trying to look humble or a businesswoman seeking a change. I mean someone truly ordinary." Jackson's brow furrowed, his curiosity growing as his friends exchanged amused glances. "Define ordinary," he demanded, his tone edged with skepticism. Jacob leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as he nodded toward a waitress clearing tables nearby. "I mean someone like her, that single mom who's been running around this place all day. Amara Miller, the McDonald's waitress. Let's see you bring someone like her into your high-flying world and make it work. No tricks, no contracts, just a real, genuine marriage." Jaxon followed Jacob's gaze to Amara Miller. At 28 years old, she was doing her best to support her 5-year-old daughter, Chloe, working long hours with quiet determination. Her light brown hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, and her face was devoid of the heavy makeup typical of the women in Jackson's circle. She moved with purpose, her expression composed, her eyes reflecting both fatigue and an undeniable resilience. To Jackson's privileged world, she was practically invisible. "You want me to marry her?" Jaxon repeated, his voice laced with disbelief and a hint of amusement. "That's right," Jacob confirmed, his grin widening. "And if you pull it off, I'll give you $2 million. But remember, it has to be real. No prenups, no exit strategies. You've got to win her heart, marry her, and make it last." Jaxon scoffed, leaning back in his chair as he considered the audacity of the challenge. $2 million was hardly worth his time, but the bet itself intrigued him. Winning was his specialty, and the idea of conquering such an unlikely scenario was tantalizing. It wasn't about the money, it was about proving once again that he could bend the world to his will. His lips curled into a confident smile as he raised his soda cup in a mock toast. $2 million? Consider it done. Start writing the check, Jacob, because I never lose." His friends burst into laughter, convinced they were witnessing the beginning of yet another victorious conquest for the unbeatable Jaxon Harrison. But, even as the laughter died down, Jaxon felt a thrill he hadn't experienced in a long time. This was a different kind of challenge, a human puzzle to solve. His eyes returned to Amara as she wiped down a table, her movements efficient, her demeanor unfazed by the chaos around her. He watched her closely, noticing the determined set of her jaw, the way her shoulders straightened under the weight of her responsibility. She wasn't like anyone he'd pursued before, she was real. When she approached their table to clear away empty cups, Jaxon seized the moment. "Amara," he called out smoothly, his voice carrying the practiced charm that rarely failed him. She looked up, clearly surprised that he knew her name. Her expression remained neutral, guarded. "Yes, can I help you with something?" He flashed his most charismatic smile. "I'm Jaxon. I don't think you've ever served me before." Amara blinked, momentarily thrown off. "I've been working here for months. You probably just didn't notice." Poor blunt honesty caught him off guard, but Jaxon recovered quickly, his smile never faltering. "Well, that changes today. How about we grab a coffee sometime? I'd like to get to know you." Amara's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "You want to get coffee? With me?" "Why not?" he asked, his tone light, deliberately nonchalant. "Everyone deserves a break now and then." She looked him over, suspicion evident in her eyes. "I'm working right now." "Of course," Jaxon replied smoothly, "but you must have a day off. Just a chat, no pressure." Amara hesitated, her gaze flickering between him and the table she was clearing. There was a moment of silence before she shook her head, her ponytail swaying with the movement. "I have to get back to work," she said flatly, turning away without another word. Jaxon watched her retreat, his smile fading as a new sensation crept in. Rejection. It was rare for him to be dismissed so easily, and he found himself both annoyed and fascinated. As his friends chuckled at the exchange, Jaxon's resolve hardened. This wasn't just about the bet anymore. Amara Miller was a challenge, and Jaxon Harrison never backed down from a challenge. With renewed determination, he leaned back, his eyes never leaving her as she continued to work, oblivious to the storm she had just ignited within him. This game was just beginning. Jaxon felt an unexpected wave of frustration ripple through him. Amara's indifference was not the reaction he was accustomed to. He was used to his charm working effortlessly, yet she had deflected his advances with ease. Rather than discouraging him, her resistance only fueled his determination. There was something about her that intrigued him, a resilience he hadn't anticipated. Unlike the women he typically encountered, she was neither captivated by his wealth nor swayed by his charisma. She was a challenge, and Jaxon Harrison thrived on challenges. As she moved through the restaurant, gathering empty cups and tossing them into the trash with swift efficiency, Jaxon kept his gaze locked on her. Her focus never wavered, not even when she caught him watching. When she approached his table again, he leaned back, his expression relaxed, but his mind calculating his next move. "I'm persistent, Amara," he thought, his lips curving into a confident smile. "You'll learn that soon enough. I don't give up easily." Amara barely glanced at him as she continued her work, offering only a polite smile before responding, "Good luck with that," her tone casual and indifferent. But that subtle brush-off only served to ignite his competitive spirit even more. What had begun as a frivolous bet among friends was becoming something more significant. Jaxon Harrison had never walked away from a challenge, and this was no different. Jacob's $2 million bet was trivial to him, but his pride was on the line. No one denied Jaxon Harrison, and Amara Miller would be no exception. He was determined to win her over, not just because of the bet, but because she had piqued his curiosity in a way no one else had before. As his friends finished their meals and prepared to leave, Jaxon cast one last look at Amara. She moved with purpose, her attention solely on her work, completely oblivious to the game that was beginning to unfold. Jaxon felt a spark of anticipation. The next time he approached her, he would be more strategic, more direct. If there was one thing he understood better than anyone, it was how to get what he wanted, and right now, what he wanted was Amara Miller. The following Tuesday, Jaxon returned to McDonald's. It was a calculated decision. He needed to make his presence known, to plant himself in her daily routine. He watched her from his seat as she took orders and moved between tables with practiced efficiency. There was a determination about her that Jaxon found intriguing. She wasn't just working, she was persevering, moving with purpose even under the weight of long hours and the demands of single motherhood. There was strength there, a quiet resilience that made her stand apart from the women he was used to. She didn't flirt, didn't linger, or try to capture his attention. In fact, she seemed completely uninterested in him, which was a novelty Jaxon didn't quite know how to process. When Amara finally approached his table, Jaxon was ready. He met her with an easy smile. "Hey, Amara. Didn't think you'd see me again so soon, did you?" Amara looked at him with mild surprise, her expression guarded. "I didn't know you were a regular here," she replied, her tone neutral. Jaxon's smile widened. "Well, maybe I'm trying something new. Besides, the service here is great." He said it playfully, his eyes lingering on her, hoping to break through her professional exterior. Amara's response was a skeptical arch of her eyebrow. "Sure it is," she replied dryly, jotting down his order. Her indifference was palpable, but Jaxon was undeterred. Before she could leave, he leaned in slightly, dropping his voice to a more sincere tone. "How about that coffee I mentioned? I just want to get to know you better, no pressure." Amara paused, clearly considering his offer, but then her expression shifted, becoming more resolute. I'm flattered, but I don't have time for casual meetups. I have responsibilities, she said firmly, her gaze unwavering. Jaxon felt his confidence waver for a split second. She wasn't playing hard to get. She genuinely wasn't interested. He realized that his usual approach, charm and persistence, wouldn't work on her. He needed a new strategy. His expression softened and his voice lost its playful edge. I understand. I'm not trying to complicate your life. I just think you're interesting and I'd like to get to know you. That's all. His sincerity seemed to catch her off guard. Amara hesitated, her eyes searching his face as if trying to gauge his authenticity. After a moment, she let out a small sigh. One coffee, she relented, her tone cautious. But it'll be quick. I really don't have time for much more. Jackson's heart leapt at the small victory. He had found his opening. It was only a crack, but it was enough. He flashed her a grateful smile. That's all I'm asking for, he said warmly. As she walked away, Jaxon felt the thrill of anticipation. This was more than just a bet now. Amara was a puzzle he was determined to solve. She was different, real, grounded, and completely unimpressed by his wealth or status. For the first time in a long while, Jaxon felt genuinely challenged. He watched her work, her movements graceful and efficient, her focus unwavering. This was going to be more difficult than he had anticipated, but that only made the game more enticing. Jaxon Harrison never backed down, and he certainly wasn't about to start now. Amara Miller might have been able to resist his charm today, but he was just getting started. Jaxon had his opening. That same afternoon, they met at a small cafe just down the street from McDonald's. Amara arrived on time, her posture rigid, still wearing her work uniform. It was clear she felt out of place, her fingers nervously adjusting the collar of her shirt as she approached the table. Jaxon, on the other hand, was effortlessly composed, his demeanor radiating confidence and ease. They chose a secluded table at the back, away from the noise of the other customers. As Amara picked up the menu, her eyes skimmed over the options without genuine interest. Jaxon watched her closely, noting the guarded expression on her face, the subtle tension in her shoulders. She was cautious, not quite trusting his intentions. He decided to start light. So, Amara, how long have you been working at McDonald's? He asked, his voice warm and casual, an attempt to break through her defenses. She shrugged, her fingers toying with the edge of the menu. A few years now. It's how I support my daughter, Eliza. I work long hours, but it's what I can manage for now. Her tone was matter of fact, revealing little emotion. Jaxon blinked, momentarily caught off guard. He hadn't known she was a mother. A wave of unexpected respect washed over him. She was more complex than he'd realized. You have a daughter? He repeated, his curiosity genuine. How old is she? 5, Amara answered, her voice softening just slightly. She's my whole world. Jaxon felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Was it admiration? He wasn't used to women whose lives revolved around anything other than wealth and status. That must keep you busy, he commented, trying to keep his tone light. Do you ever get any free time? A dry laugh escaped Amara's lips. Not really. When I'm not at work, I'm with Eliza. Between school, meals, and just trying to keep everything together, there's not much time left for anything else. Jaxon listened intently, struggling to relate. In his world, problems were solved with money, and time was a luxury he could afford in abundance. But Amara's life was built on sacrifice and responsibility. For the first time, he realized just how different their worlds truly were. That sounds exhausting, he admitted, a trace of awe in his voice. Amara looked at him, her eyes revealing just a flicker of surprise. It is, she agreed, her tone unwavering. But that's life. You do what you have to do. Jaxon was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. He was used to people who complained about inconveniences like delayed flights or insufficient caviar at galas. Yet here was Amara, facing real challenges with quiet strength. He found himself respecting her more than he expected. She broke the silence first. And you, Jaxon, what's your story? He leaned back, his familiar smirk returning. I'm the CEO of a tech company. It keeps me busy, but it's different. Amara's expression didn't change. She simply nodded, as if she had already figured as much. I thought so. That's why I was surprised you asked me to coffee. People like you don't usually talk to people like me. Jaxon was taken aback, not just by her bluntness but by the underlying truth in her words. In his world, people were drawn to power and status. They didn't look twice at waitresses or single moms. But hearing Amara say it so plainly made him uncomfortable. "Why do you think that?" he asked, his voice more defensive than he intended. "Do you think everyone's the same?" Amara met his gaze directly, her eyes steady and unyielding. "No, not everyone," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "But from what I've seen, people like you stick to your own circles. It's just how it is." Jaxon felt himself being cornered by her honesty. She was right, of course, but he wasn't about to admit that. Instead, he leaned forward, his demeanor softening. "Maybe that's exactly what interests me about you. You're not part of that world. You're real." Amara's shoulders tensed, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Look, Jaxon, I don't know what you're after, but my priority is my daughter. I'm here because you seem sincere, but I don't have time for games." Her directness hit him harder than he expected. For a moment he felt a twinge of guilt about the bet, but he quickly pushed the feeling aside. He couldn't afford to get distracted. "I understand," he said, his voice softer, more sincere than before. "No games, I promise." Amara studied him, her gaze searching his face for any sign of deception. Her eyes lingered on his for a moment longer than necessary before she let out a soft sigh. "All right, Jaxon," she conceded, her voice still cautious. "I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but I won't tolerate dishonesty." Jaxon felt a flicker of triumph, but he kept his expression neutral. "Fair enough," he agreed, nodding. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Amara finished her coffee and stood up, her posture still guarded. "I told you it'd be a quick coffee," she reminded him, her tone matter-of-fact. Jackson's smile returned, this time more genuine. "I appreciate you giving me the chance." He hesitated, then added, "Maybe we could do this again sometime? No pressure, just coffee." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes revealing a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Finally, she gave a reluctant nod. "Maybe," she said simply, before turning and walking away. Jaxon watched her leave, his mind racing. She was different, and not just because of her background. Amara was real, grounded, and unafraid to speak her mind. She wasn't interested in his wealth or status, and that made her unpredictable. For the first time in a long while, Jaxon felt truly challenged, and he was more determined than ever to win. But as he replayed their conversation in his head, Jaxon realized something unsettling. Amara had seen through his charm, through his practiced lines and effortless confidence. She wasn't fooled by his wealth or power. She saw him for who he really was, and that realization shook him more than he cared to admit. This wasn't just about the bet anymore. Amara Miller was changing the game, and Jaxon Harrison wasn't sure if he was winning or losing. But one thing was certain, he wasn't about to walk away. Not now. Not when the challenge was just getting started. Jaxon stood there for a moment, watching as Amara moved back behind the counter, her shoulders tense and her movements slightly more mechanical than before. He could see the turmoil his words had caused, the way she was trying to make sense of his sudden, outrageous proposal. A part of him felt a flicker of guilt, knowing that his intentions weren't as pure as he was letting on. Yet another part of him, the part that had always thrived on challenges and competition, was exhilarated. This was the most unpredictable game he had ever played. For the first time in his life, Jaxon wasn't sure of the outcome, and that was both terrifying and thrilling. He turned and walked out of the McDonald's, his mind replaying the conversation over and over again. The look in her eyes, part shock, part confusion, and a sliver of curiosity, stayed with him long after he'd driven away. She hadn't said no. That was a start. Over the next few days, Jaxon found himself thinking about Amara more than he expected. The bet was still there, lurking at the back of his mind, but it was no longer the driving force. There was something about Amara, her strength, her vulnerability, her unwavering dedication to her daughter, that fascinated him. She was so different from anyone he had ever known. She was real, and in his world, where everything was polished and staged, her authenticity was captivating. But Jaxon also knew that he had made his move too soon. He had to be smarter, more strategic. If he wanted Amara to say yes, he would have to show her a side of himself that no one else had ever seen. The next week, Jaxon returned to McDonald's, his approach more cautious this time. He didn't rush to talk to her. Instead, he took a seat at a corner table, observing her as she worked. She moved with practiced efficiency, her face composed and focused, but he noticed the way her shoulders tensed whenever she caught sight of him, the way she avoided his gaze. He waited patiently, his opportunity finally arriving when Amara approached his table to clear some trays. Jaxon looked up, his expression sincere. "Amara, I owe you an apology." She paused, her hands gripping the tray tightly. "For what?" she asked, her voice wary. "For what I said the other day," Jaxon admitted, his tone genuine. "I realize I was out of line, I came on too strong, and I made you uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention." Amara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. She seemed to be weighing his words, trying to determine if his apology was sincere. After a moment, she exhaled, her posture relaxing slightly. "You did take me by surprise. People don't just propose out of nowhere." Jaxon laughed, the sound unexpectedly soft and self-deprecating. "Yeah, I can see how that would be a little shocking." "A little?" Amara raised an eyebrow, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at her lips. Jaxon seized the opportunity, his demeanor becoming more earnest. "Look, I know it sounded crazy, but I meant what I said about wanting to get to know you better. I just went about it the wrong way." Amara's expression softened, and for the first time he saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why are you so interested in me?" Jaxon hesitated, his heart beating faster. He knew he couldn't tell her the truth about the bet, but he could give her a version of the truth. "Because you're different. You're real. You're not trying to impress me, and you're not pretending to be someone you're not. That's rare in my world." Amara looked away, her fingers absent-mindedly adjusting her apron. "I don't belong in your world, Jaxon." "Maybe not," he agreed, his voice soft. "But maybe that's exactly why I can't stop thinking about you." Amara's eyes widened, and for a brief moment, Jaxon saw the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. She quickly looked down, her cheeks flushing. "I need to get back to work," she mumbled, turning away. Jaxon didn't stop her. He watched as she retreated behind the counter, her movements more hurried than before. But she had heard him, really heard him, and that was enough for now. Over the next few weeks, Jaxon continued his quiet pursuit, careful not to push too hard. He showed up at McDonald's regularly, but kept his interactions brief and respectful. He asked about her daughter, Eliza, listened to her stories about balancing work and motherhood, and even made her laugh a few times. Little by little, Amara's guard began to lower. She became more relaxed around him, her smiles more frequent, her laughter more genuine. Jaxon found himself drawn to her warmth and honesty, her resilience and strength. It was more than just the thrill of the challenge. He was starting to care about her, about Eliza, about the life she had built with so much determination. One rainy afternoon, as Amara was wiping down tables, Jaxon approached her, holding out a small, colorful book. "I thought Eliza might like this," he said, his voice tentative. Amara looked at the book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and her eyes softened. She accepted the gift, her fingers lightly tracing the bright illustrations. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "She loves stories." Jaxon smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "I thought she might." Amara looked up at him, her expression both grateful and confused. "You didn't have to do this, I wanted to," Jaxon replied simply. She stared at him for a moment, her eyes searching his face, and Jaxon felt the familiar unease of being truly seen. Amara's gaze was penetrating, honest and unguarded. She wasn't looking at Jaxon Harrison, the millionaire CEO. She was looking at Jaxon, the man he wasn't sure he knew how to be. "I still don't understand you," Amara admitted, her voice soft. "Why would someone like you care about someone like me?" Jaxon felt his heart twist. He wanted to tell her everything, that she was more than just a bet, that she was changing him in ways he didn't understand, but he couldn't, not yet. "Maybe because you're the first person who's ever really looked at me," he confessed, his voice raw, "and saw more than just my name." Amara's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. She looked like she wanted to say something but stopped herself, her cheeks flushing. I have to get back to work," she stammered, turning away quickly. Jaxon watched her go, his heart pounding. He was in deeper than he had intended, the lines between the bet and his feelings blurring with each passing day. He was losing control of the game he had started, and for the first time in his life, Jaxon wasn't sure if he wanted to win or if he even knew what winning meant anymore. But one thing was certain, he couldn't walk away now. Not from Amara, not from Eliza, and not from the man he was becoming because of them. Amara spent the next few days feeling like she was walking through a dream, one that felt both enchanting and terrifying at the same time. She had said yes, not because she was swept off her feet by romance, but because of the promise of security for Eliza. The ring on her finger sparkled with a delicate elegance, a constant reminder of the promise she had made and the life she was about to step into. But even as she admired the delicate band, a heavy feeling settled in her chest. This wasn't just a marriage proposal, it was a gamble, a leap into the unknown. The transition happened almost too quickly. True to his word, Jaxon arranged everything with his usual efficiency. Within days, Amara and Eliza moved out of their small apartment and into Jaxon's mansion. A sprawling estate with immaculate gardens, tall marble pillars, and expansive rooms that seemed to echo with emptiness. The luxury was overwhelming, a world away from the modest life they had known. Eliza was fascinated, her wide eyes sparkling with wonder as she explored every corner, her laughter echoing through the halls. But Amara felt like an intruder, an imposter, stepping into someone else's story. The first few days were the hardest. Everything around her was opulent, meticulously designed to perfection, from the gleaming chandeliers to the plush carpets that felt like clouds beneath her feet. The mansion was beautiful, but it was also cold, impersonal. It didn't feel like home. Jaxon was attentive but distant. He made sure Amara and Eliza were comfortable, hired a nanny to help with Eliza, and gave Amara access to anything she needed. But even as he tried to be considerate, he was guarded, his demeanor polite but reserved. It was as though he were fulfilling an obligation rather than building a relationship. Amara told herself that she didn't expect anything more. After all, theirs was a marriage of convenience, a practical arrangement. But deep down she wondered if they would ever bridge the chasm between them. Their first dinner together at the mansion was a stark reminder of how different their worlds were. The dining room was grand, with a long mahogany table adorned with silver cutlery and crystal glasses that sparkled under the golden glow of the chandelier. Jaxon sat at the head of the table, Amara a few seats away, and Eliza between them. The space felt vast, the distance between them echoing the emotional gap Amara felt. Jaxon made an effort, his voice warm as he turned to Eliza. "Do you like it here, Eliza?" Eliza's eyes were wide with wonder, her small hands clutching her fork as she looked around. "It's like a castle," she whispered, her face lighting up. "Like a princess's house," Jaxon smiled, visibly charmed by her innocence. "Well then, that makes you the princess of this house." Eliza giggled, her laughter filling the room. Amara watched the exchange, her heart softening just a little. For Eliza, this was a fairy tale come to life. But Amara couldn't shake the unease that lingered within her. "It's right, sweetie," Amara said gently, her voice careful. "But remember, no matter where we live, we're still the same. It's just a place, a big, fancy place, but it doesn't change who we are." Jaxon's gaze flickered toward Amara, his expression unreadable. She wondered if he understood what she was trying to say, if he could see the walls she was building to protect Eliza from being overwhelmed by this new world. Trying to lighten the mood, Jaxon leaned back, a playful glint in his eyes. "You know, when I was about your age, Eliza, I got lost in a house just like this one. It was one of my parents' estates, and I was convinced there were monsters hiding in the hallways." Eliza's eyes widened, her curiosity piqued. "Monsters?" Jaxon grinned. "Oh yes, I thought for sure they were going to eat me, but then I realized it was just the shadows playing tricks on me." Eliza laughed, her face bright with amusement. "You were scared of shadows?" Jaxon chuckled, his demeanor softening. "I sure was. I was just a little boy back then, not nearly as brave as you." The story brought a lightness to the room, a glimpse of the man behind the polished exterior. Amara watched Jaxon interact with Eliza, noticing the genuine affection in his eyes. It was the first time she saw him drop his guard, even if just for a moment. But as dinner went on, Amara remained reserved, her responses polite but distant. She was still navigating this new reality, trying to figure out her place in Jaxon's world. It was clear he was trying, but every interaction felt rehearsed, as though he were following a script. She wondered if she would ever see the real Jaxon Harrison, the man behind the wealth and power. Later that night, after Eliza was tucked into her new princess-themed bed and fast asleep, Amara wandered through the mansion, her footsteps echoing softly against the marble floors. She ended up on the balcony overlooking the sprawling gardens, the moonlight casting a silvery glow over the landscape, but she was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't hear Jaxon approach until he spoke. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Amara turned, her posture stiffening slightly. "Yes, it is. It's overwhelming." Jaxon leaned against the railing, his face softening. "I can imagine. I forget sometimes how different this must be for you." Amara hesitated, her eyes fixed on the gardens below. "I never thought I'd end up in a place like this," she admitted. "It feels like stepping into another world, one I don't belong in." Jackson's expression grew serious, his voice dropping. "You do belong here, Amara. You and Eliza. This is your home now." Amara looked up, her eyes searching his face. "Why me, Jaxon? You could have had anyone. Why choose someone so ordinary?" He was silent for a moment, his gaze distant. "Because you're real. You're not pretending, not playing a role. You're different." Amara's heart fluttered, a mixture of hope and skepticism swirling within her. "I don't know how to be anyone else." "I wouldn't want you to be," Jaxon replied, his voice soft. "I need that honesty." They stood in silence, the distance between them both comforting and unnerving. Amara realized that beneath his charm and confidence, Jaxon was as lost as she was, trying to find his way in a world where everything was measured by status and wealth. For the first time since saying yes, Amara felt a glimmer of possibility, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find common ground. But she was also painfully aware of how easily this illusion could shatter. Because while Jaxon might have been sincere tonight, there was still one truth she didn't know, one secret that could break everything apart, the bet that had started it all. As the night breeze whispered around them, Amara looked up at Jaxon, seeing the man behind the mask for just a moment. But even then, she knew the walls between them were still firmly in place, and she wondered if they would ever truly come down. Days turned into weeks, and Amara gradually began to understand the complexities of Jaxon's world. It was a life driven by ambition and power, filled with endless meetings, high-stakes negotiations, and social gatherings where appearances mattered more than words. In this world, Jaxon was confident, commanding, always in control. But at home, he seemed out of place, as if he were navigating unfamiliar territory. Meanwhile, Amara focused on helping Eliza adjust to their new reality. She spent her days organizing playdates, overseeing school activities, and doing her best to maintain a sense of normalcy for her daughter. Yet, even as she settled into the luxurious mansion, Amara felt like a stranger in her own life. The marble floors were cold beneath her feet, the grand halls echoed with emptiness, and the opulent rooms seemed more like museum displays than places to live. Jaxon made a sincere effort to be present. He would come home early on occasion, sit with them during dinner, and ask about Eliza's day. But his presence was always shadowed by distance, a wall built from years of living in a world where emotions were liabilities. Amara appreciated his attempts, but she couldn't help but feel that they were playing roles rather than building a relationship. One afternoon, Amara was helping Eliza with her homework in the living room when Jaxon walked in. He stopped at the doorway, watching them with a curious expression. Eliza was sprawled across the floor, crayons scattered around her as she concentrated on a drawing, her little face scrunched up in determination. Amara sat beside her, gently guiding her through the task, her voice soft and patient. There was something so natural, so real about the scene, that Jaxon felt a pang of longing. It was a simplicity he had never known, a purity that didn't exist in his world of contracts and negotiations. He cleared his throat, feeling oddly self-conscious. "Do you need any help?" he asked, his tone awkward. Amara looked up, surprise flashing across her face. "You know anything about first-grade homework?" Jaxon laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Probably not, but I can try." Mara's lips curved into a smile, the first genuine one he'd seen from her in days. "All right then. Eliza could use some help with her math. Jaxon sat down next to them, his posture stiff at first, but he gradually relaxed as Eliza's laughter filled the room. She giggled every time he made a mistake, her eyes lighting up with amusement as she corrected him. Jaxon found himself smiling, genuinely smiling, as he let his guard down and allowed himself to simply be there, with them. For a brief moment, the distance between them didn't feel so insurmountable. But even as Amara saw glimpses of the man behind the facade, she couldn't fully trust him. Their marriage had begun on uncertain ground, and Amara couldn't shake the feeling that Jaxon was still holding back, that he was still playing a role. She wanted to believe his sincerity, but she had learned long ago not to rely on anyone but herself. That night, as Jaxon was getting ready for bed, he noticed Amara sitting at the edge of the mattress, her shoulders tense, her gaze distant. She looked lost, as if she were carrying a burden too heavy to bear. "What's wrong?" he asked cautiously, unsure of how to approach her. Amara sighed, her fingers twisting nervously. "Jaxon, what are we doing? This marriage, it doesn't feel real. We don't have a history, no foundation, we're just pretending." Her words struck him like a blow, forcing him to confront the reality he'd been avoiding. He sat down beside her, his expression serious. "I know, I've been thinking about that too." Amara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "I appreciate that you're trying, but I can't help feeling like we're forcing something that doesn't fit. I need to know the truth, Jaxon. Why did you do this? Why me?" Jaxon felt his heart pound, the lie about the bet burning on his tongue. But he couldn't tell her. Not now. Not when he was starting to care. Not when he was starting to believe that maybe they could make this work. Taking a deep breath, he looked her in the eyes. "I chose you because you're different. You're honest. You're not trying to impress anyone, and you don't care about my money or my status. You're real, Amara. And I need that." Amara's expression softened, a hint of vulnerability flickering in her eyes. "I don't want to be just another challenge for you, Jaxon. I don't want to be another box you check off your list." "You're not," he insisted, his voice firm. "This isn't a game to me. I want to build something real with you, even if we didn't start out the right way." Amara's gaze dropped to her hands, her fingers twisting the ring on her finger. "I want to believe you. I want to give this a chance, for Eliza's sake. But if you're lying to me, if you're not serious about this, I can't let her get hurt. I can't let myself get hurt." Jaxon's chest tightened at the pain in her voice, the walls she had built to protect herself. He realized just how much she had been through, how hard it must have been to let him in. He reached out, his hand gently covering hers. "I promise, Amara. I'm in this. I want to make it work." She looked up, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. "All right, but don't make promises you can't keep." "I won't," Jaxon whispered, his voice rough. "I won't let you down." They sat in silence, their hands still intertwined. It wasn't perfect, and the uncertainty still lingered, but for the first time, they were facing it together. In the weeks that followed, Jaxon found himself changing. He started spending more time at home, joining them for dinners, helping Eliza with her homework, and even reading her bedtime stories. He laughed more, smiled more, and began to see life through Amara's eyes. Simple, genuine, and full of meaning. The mansion no longer felt cold, and the echoes of loneliness were replaced with Eliza's laughter. He was beginning to care, truly care, about Amara and Eliza. And that scared him, because the bet still loomed in the background, a dark shadow that threatened to destroy everything they were building. Every time Amara smiled at him, every time Eliza hugged him goodnight, Jaxon felt the guilt coil tighter around his heart. He was falling for them, but his love was built on a lie, and he didn't know how much longer he could keep up the charade. Jaxon Harrison was used to winning, but for the first time in his life, he didn't know what winning meant anymore. Because if he lost Amara's trust, if he broke Eliza's heart, then he would lose everything that mattered. The worst part was, he was starting to realize that he cared more about them than he did about the bet or his pride. But the truth was a ticking time bomb, and sooner or later it would come to light. He just didn't know how to stop it. Jaxon had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed, as he did sitting across from Amara in that quiet, dimly lit living room. The air was heavy with unspoken truths, and his chest felt tight, weighed down by the secrets he was struggling to keep. Yet, as he looked at Amara, her eyes gentle, her presence calm, he felt a warmth he'd never known before. It was the warmth of trust, of being seen for who he really was. Their lives had become unexpectedly intertwined. What had begun as a foolish bet had evolved into something he couldn't quite name. It was no longer about winning or proving his power. It was about finding himself in the presence of a woman who saw through all his pretenses, who demanded nothing from him but honesty. "I don't think I've ever had anyone I could really talk to about these things," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. It felt strange to be this open, this raw. He was so used to guarding himself, keeping up appearances, playing the role of the powerful CEO. But with Amara, the walls came down, and for the first time, he could just be Jaxon. Amara smiled, her eyes softening. "Sometimes, Jaxon, you just need someone to listen, someone who doesn't expect anything in return." Her words struck a chord deep within him, and Jaxon realized how lonely his life had been. Surrounded by people who wanted things from him, money, power, status, he had never truly known what it felt like to be accepted without condition. But Amara expected nothing, asked for nothing. She simply listened, without judgment, without expectation. The days passed, and Jaxon found himself gravitating towards Amara and Eliza more and more. He rearranged his work schedule, found excuses to come home early, and started spending his weekends with them. He found joy in the smallest moments, helping Eliza with her homework, cooking breakfast together, or just sitting on the couch, talking about nothing and everything. One weekend, Jaxon surprised them with a trip to the park. It was an ordinary gesture, but for Eliza it was an adventure. She ran across the grass, her laughter ringing through the air as Jaxon chased her, his heart light and free. Amara watched them, her face radiant with a smile that made Jackson's chest tighten. In that moment, he realized he was falling in love. Not just with Eliza's innocent joy, but with Amara's strength, her kindness, her quiet resilience. Later that afternoon, as Eliza played on the swings, Jaxon sat beside Amara on a park bench. He stared out at the playground, his heart pounding as he tried to find the right words. "Amara," he began, his voice low. "I know we started this in a strange way, but I'm trying to figure out what's happening to me." She turned to look at him, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean?" Jaxon hesitated, his hands clenching nervously. "I never thought I'd feel this connected. Spending time with you and Eliza. It's become the best part of my day. You've made me see life differently. I didn't expect that." Amara's face softened, a gentle smile curving her lips. "I feel it too, Jaxon, but we need to be honest with each other. If this isn't real, I can't let myself or Eliza get hurt." Jaxon looked into her eyes, his heart thudding. "It's real, Amara. I've never been so sure about anything in my life." It was the truth, and yet it wasn't the whole truth. The secret of the bet loomed over him, a dark shadow that threatened to shatter everything they were building. But he couldn't bring himself to confess. Not yet. Not when everything felt so fragile, so precious. As the weeks turned into months, Jaxon's transformation became undeniable. He distanced himself from his old friends, the ones who had cheered on the bet, who had never truly known him. Jacob was the hardest to break away from. They'd been friends for years, bound by shared ambition and a ruthless pursuit of power. But Jacob couldn't understand the changes in Jaxon, couldn't accept his growing affection for Amara and Eliza. One night, Jacob confronted him. "What's going on with you, Jaxon? You're pulling away from everyone. Is this about the bet?" Jackson's jaw tightened, his fists clenching. "It's not about the bet anymore. I care about them. I want things to work with Amara." Jacob scoffed, disbelief etched on his face. "You're serious? You're actually falling for her?" "Yes," Jaxon said firmly, his voice unwavering. "And if you can't accept that, then maybe we're not as close as I thought." Jacob shook his head, his eyes cold. "You're throwing everything away for her?" Jaxon's expression hardened. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing what really matters." That conversation marked the end of his friendship with Jacob. It was painful, but necessary. Jaxon knew he couldn't hold on to his old life if he wanted to build something real with Amara and Eliza. And the more time he spent with them, the more he realized how empty his life had been before they entered it. One evening, Jaxon returned home to find Amara waiting for him, concern evident on her face. She noticed the tension in his shoulders, the weariness in his eyes. "Rough day?" she asked, her voice gentle. Jaxon sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "I feel like everything I used to value is slipping away. I'm losing friends, losing connections. It feels like I'm losing myself." Amara sat beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Maybe you're just finding something more real, Jaxon. Sometimes we need to let go of who we were to become who we're meant to be." Her words touched him deeply, bringing a sense of clarity he hadn't known he needed. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and realized that she was his anchor, his constant, the one person who made him feel whole. He reached out, his hand finding hers. "Amara, I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you." Her eyes softened, her fingers tightening around his. "Then don't." It was such a simple answer, but it meant everything. In that moment, Jaxon made a decision. He was ready to leave his old life behind, to be the man Amara deserved, the father Eliza needed. But to do that, he would have to come clean. He would have to tell her the truth about the bet, no matter how much it hurt. Because loving Amara meant being honest with her, and he was finally ready to take that risk. For the first time in his life, Jaxon was willing to lose everything, to gain the only thing that truly mattered. The silence that followed Amara's departure was deafening. Jaxon stood frozen in the middle of the living room, the weight of his confession crashing down on him like a tidal wave. His heart felt heavy, constricted with guilt and regret. He had known that revealing the truth would be painful, but he hadn't anticipated the look of betrayal in Amara's eyes. That look haunted him, echoing her words, "You're the reason I had to fight to raise my daughter. How can I forgive that?" He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands, replaying every moment of their conversation. He had been the cause of her suffering, the architect of the hardships that had shaped her life. And the cruel irony was that he had fallen in love with the very strength that his actions had forced her to develop. But Amara had been right. He couldn't fix this with words or apologies. He had to prove that he was more than the man who had once made callous decisions for the sake of profit. And as he sat there, alone in the cold, empty mansion, he realized that for the first time in his life, winning wasn't about strategy or power. It was about earning forgiveness and trust. The next morning, Jaxon woke to the sound of Eliza's laughter echoing from the kitchen. His heart twisted painfully. Would he lose that too? He pulled himself together and went downstairs, finding Amara making breakfast while Eliza chattered excitedly about her upcoming school play. The scene was warm, domestic, everything he had come to cherish. But the tension was palpable. Amara didn't meet his eyes. Her shoulders were stiff, her face drawn as she moved around the kitchen with mechanical precision. The distance between them was more than just physical. It was a chasm of broken trust and hurt, and Jaxon knew he was the one who had created it. After breakfast, as Eliza skipped off to play, Jaxon finally approached Amara. "Amara, please, can we talk?" She turned slowly, her expression guarded, arms crossed over her chest. "Talk? Now you want to talk? After dropping that bombshell on me last night?" Jackson's shoulders sagged. "I know I hurt you. I can't change the past, but I want to make things right. I need to make things right." Amara's eyes flashed with anger. "Do you even understand what you took from me? My home, my stability, everything I built my life on was destroyed because of your decision. And you want to make it right? How, Jaxon? By throwing money at it?" He flinched, the sting of her accusation hitting home. "No, I don't want to buy my way out of this. I want to help rebuild what I took from you. I want to do it the right way, whatever it takes." Amara's expression softened, but only slightly. "You can't undo the past, Jaxon. You can't erase the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering how I was going to feed my child. You can't take back the shame of standing behind that counter, feeling invisible and powerless." Tears welled in her eyes, but she held her ground, her voice steady. "I built my life back from the ground up, without you, without your money, and I will not let you turn this into another one of your projects." Jaxon swallowed hard, guilt tightening around his throat. "You're right. You were strong, stronger than I could ever be, and I admire you for that, but I love you, Amara. I love you and Eliza more than I thought I could love anyone. Please, give me a chance to prove that I'm not the man who hurt you." Amara looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for sincerity. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "You have to earn my trust, Jaxon, not with words, but with actions, and it won't be easy." Jaxon nodded, his resolve strengthening. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes." That day marked the beginning of his journey to redemption. He started by visiting the town where the factory had once stood, a place he had never bothered to visit before. It was a ghost town, the empty buildings standing as silent witnesses to the devastation his decision had caused. Seeing the boarded-up shops, the abandoned homes, and the desolate streets made Jaxon's heart ache with shame. He met with the community leaders, listened to their stories, and apologized for the pain his actions had caused. It was humbling, standing before people whose lives he had disrupted, whose livelihoods he had destroyed. But it was necessary, and it was only the first step. He began working on a plan to rebuild the community, not just with money, but with jobs, resources, and opportunities. He reached out to local businesses, offered support for small entrepreneurs, and pledged to reopen the factory, not for profit, but for the people who needed it. Amara watched his efforts from a distance, her skepticism slowly melting as she saw his dedication. She saw him return home exhausted, his shoulders heavy with the weight of his choices, but his eyes determined. He was changing, not just for her, but for himself. And that meant more than any apology. Weeks passed, and Jaxon continued to fight for redemption. He showed up for Eliza, attending her school play, helping her with her homework, and playing games with her in the backyard. He didn't try to buy her affection. He earned it, day by day, moment by moment. Amara was slower to forgive. She kept her distance, her guard still up, but her heart began to soften as she watched Jaxon's transformation. She saw the way he looked at Eliza, the way he listened to her stories with genuine interest, the way he made her laugh with his silly antics. One evening, as they were tucking Eliza into bed, Jaxon caught Amara's eye. There was a vulnerability there, a hint of hope, and in that fleeting moment he knew he was getting closer to winning her trust. But the final breakthrough came unexpectedly. Jaxon was organizing a community event to celebrate the reopening of the factory when Amara found him standing alone, his shoulders slumped, his face drawn with worry. She approached him, her voice gentle. "You're really doing it. You're giving them back what you took." Jaxon turned, his eyes weary but resolute. "I'm trying. I don't know if it will ever be enough, but I have to try." Amara looked at him, her heart pounding. She saw the man who had once been her enemy, the man who had caused her so much pain, and realized that he was no longer that man. He was different, humbled, changed. Real. She stepped closer, her voice softening. "You've kept your word. You've shown me who you really are, and I believe you." Jaxon's breath caught, hope flickering in his eyes. "Amara?" She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I can't forget what happened, but I can forgive because I see the man you've become, and I love him." Jaxon's heart swelled with emotion, his eyes filling with tears. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, his heart pounding with gratitude and love. He had fought for this, for her, for them, and he had won, not by conquering, but by surrendering to love. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Jaxon realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for his whole life. Not power, not wealth, but love, forgiveness, and redemption. And he would spend the rest of his life cherishing it. The days after Jaxon's confession were filled with an agonizing silence that weighed heavy on the mansion. Amara's cold demeanor was a constant reminder of the pain he had caused, and every time their eyes met, Jaxon felt the sting of guilt tightening around his chest. He tried to respect her space, giving her the distance she needed, but the emptiness left behind was suffocating. Amara did her best to keep up appearances for Eliza's sake, maintaining her daily routines with robotic precision. But each time she looked at Jaxon, she was reminded of the cruel twist of fate that had brought him into her life. The man she had come to trust, the man she was beginning to love, was the same one who had torn her world apart. The betrayal felt like a knife to the heart, and Amara couldn't decide if she was more angry with Jaxon or herself for letting. Dinner became a strained ritual. They sat at the same table, shared the same meals, but spoke only when necessary. Eliza's innocent chatter filled the silence, but even her laughter couldn't bridge the chasm that had opened between her parents. It was during one of these strained dinners that Jaxon finally broke the silence, his voice trembling. "Amara, I know I hurt you, and I can't undo the past, but would you give me a chance to show that I've changed?" Amara's eyes were cold, her voice sharp. "You want a chance? After everything you've taken from me? From Eliza? Don't you think that's just a little too convenient?" Jackson's shoulders sagged, shame coloring his cheeks. "You're right. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I love you, I love Eliza, and I can't walk away without trying to make this right." Amara shook her head, her expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You don't get to play the hero, Jaxon, not when you're the reason I had to fight so hard to survive. I trusted you, and you were the reason I suffered." Her words cut deep, but Jaxon didn't flinch. He knew he deserved every bit of her anger. "I know I broke your trust, but I swear to you, Amara, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to rebuild it. Not with words, but with action." Amara stood, her posture rigid. "I don't need your words or your charity. I needed your honesty, and you couldn't give me that." She walked away, her footsteps echoing in the hall, leaving Jaxon alone with his guilt. That night, Jaxon lay awake, haunted by Amara's words. He knew he couldn't fix the past with apologies. He needed to do more, to prove that he was more than the man who had once put profits above people, and so he made a decision. The next morning he left the mansion without saying a word. He drove to the town where the factory had once stood, a town he had never bothered to visit before. It was a ghost town, hollowed out by his decision to shut down the factory. The empty buildings stood like skeletons, a haunting reminder of the lives he had disrupted. Jaxon spoke with the people there. Former employees who had lost their jobs, their homes, their security. He listened to their stories, felt the weight of their struggles, and apologized, not as a CEO, but as a man who had made a terrible mistake. It was humbling, and it hurt, but he knew he had to face the consequences of his choices if he ever hoped to rebuild what he had broken. He spent days in that town meeting with community leaders, local businesses, and families. He heard their pain, their anger, their loss, and he took it all in, vowing to make things right. He set up a community fund using his own wealth to provide financial support, job training, and resources to help the town rebuild. He promised to reopen the factory, not for profit, but to restore hope and dignity to the people he had wronged. When Jaxon finally returned home, he was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but he felt lighter, as though he was beginning to shed the weight of his guilt. Amara was waiting for him, her expression guarded. She had noticed his absence, his silence, and curiosity had replaced some of her anger. "Where have you been?" Jaxon took a deep breath. "I went to the town, where the factory was. I met the people I hurt. I listened to their stories, and I promised to help them rebuild." Amara's eyes widened, her anger giving way to surprise. "You went there? Why?" "Because I needed to face what I did," Jaxon said quietly. "I needed to see the consequences of my choices, and I needed to start making things right." Amara crossed her arms, her voice skeptical. "And how exactly are you planning to do that?" "I set up a fund to help the people who lost their jobs. I'm reopening the factory, not to make money, but to restore the jobs I took away. It won't fix everything, but it's a start." Amara was silent, her eyes searching his face. She saw the exhaustion in his features, the vulnerability in his voice, and for the first time she saw the man behind the title, the man behind the decisions. It was the first real glimpse of Jaxon, the man who was trying to change. She looked away, her voice wavering. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Jaxon. Not yet." "I understand," Jaxon replied, his voice steady. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just want you to see that I'm trying, that I want to be better, for you, for Eliza, and for all the people I hurt." Amara's eyes softened, her anger tempered by the sincerity in his words. "I see that. But it doesn't change the past." "No, it doesn't," Jaxon agreed. But maybe we can start building a better future. Even if you never forgive me, I want to earn back your trust." Amara looked at him, her walls slowly crumbling. She saw the pain in his eyes, the regret etched on his face, and she knew that he was genuinely sorry. She didn't want to forgive him, not yet. But she also couldn't deny the courage it had taken for him to face the consequences of his actions. She took a step closer, her voice softer. "I don't know if we can go back to the way things were, but I'm willing to see who you're becoming." Jaxon's heart lifted, hope flickering in his chest. "That's enough for me." They stood there, in the quiet living room, two people trying to rebuild what had been broken. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but for the first time, they were moving forward, together. Jaxon knew he still had a long way to go, but he also knew that he was finally on the right path, and he would fight every day to prove that he was worthy of Amara's trust, her forgiveness, and her love. The silence that followed was suffocating, a heavy weight that pressed down on Jaxon as he stood frozen, his heart pounding painfully in his chest. The door slammed shut behind Amara, her sobs echoing faintly down the hallway. Her words played over and over in his head. "First, you destroyed my life with the factory, and now our marriage was just a bet." He felt his knees buckle, his body sinking into the chair behind his desk. His hands trembled, his head falling into them as he struggled to breathe. He had been prepared to fight for her forgiveness over the factory closure, but this was a betrayal so deep he wasn't sure he could ever fix it. Jacob stood by the doorway, his arms crossed, his expression smug. "Well, that was entertaining. You always were a sucker for a good challenge, Jaxon. Too bad you lost this one." Jackson's head snapped up, fury blazing in his eyes. "Get out." Jacob's smile faltered. "What?" "I said get out," Jaxon repeated, his voice low and dangerous. "We're done, Jacob. After everything you've seen, after knowing what I'm going through, you still did this. Get the hell out of my house." Jacob's face hardened. "You're choosing her over me, over everything we built together?" Jaxon stood, his shoulders squared, his gaze unwavering. "Yes, because she's real. And you're just another lie I told myself." Jacob's mouth twisted into a sneer. "You've gone soft, Jaxon. You think you can just play house and everything will be okay? You're pathetic." Jaxon didn't flinch. "Maybe, but at least I'm trying to be better. You wouldn't understand that." Jacob's face darkened, but he didn't argue. He turned on his heel and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Jaxon stood there, the silence closing in once more. He had lost his best friend, but that loss was nothing compared to what he had just done to Amara. He moved through the mansion like a man possessed, searching for her, but every room he checked was empty. Every call of her name met with echoing silence. Panic set in as he reached Eliza's room and found it vacant, the small bed neatly made, the toys left untouched. They were gone. A cold dread filled him, his mind racing as he stumbled back into the hallway. He heard movement downstairs and rushed to the entrance, his heart shattering as he found Amara at the door, Eliza's hand in hers, suitcases by their feet. "Amara, wait!" he shouted, his voice breaking. "Please, don't go!" Amara looked up, her eyes red and swollen, her face pale with pain and betrayal. Eliza clung to her side, her little face confused and scared. It broke Jaxon's heart to see that fear, that uncertainty in the eyes of the child he had come to love as his own. Amara's voice was cold, her words cutting through him like a knife. "You lied to me. You lied to Eliza. Our entire relationship was a lie, and I won't let my daughter be part of that." Jaxon's knees felt weak, his hands shaking as he reached for her. "Please, Amara, I love you. I love Eliza. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." She flinched, pulling Eliza closer, her voice trembling with anger. "You destroyed my life once with that factory, and I was stupid enough to believe you could give us a new one, but all you did was build another lie. You were playing a game, and we were just your pawns." Jaxon's vision blurred with tears, his chest tightening painfully. "It started as a bet, yes, but it became real. I swear, Amara, I fell in love with you. I fell in love with Eliza. This was never a game to me." Amara's expression hardened, her eyes flashing with anger. "You made me fall in love with a man who doesn't exist. You lied about who you were, about why you were with me. How can I ever trust you again? Jaxon felt his heart shatter, his body trembling. I'll do anything, Amara. Anything to prove to you that I've changed. That I love you. Just, please, don't go. She looked at him, her gaze icy and unyielding. I can't stay. Not when everything between us was built on lies. He watched helplessly as she picked up the suitcases, her movements stiff and mechanical. Eliza looked up at him, her little face crumpling as she realized what was happening. Daddy, are you not coming with us? The word hit Jaxon like a punch to the gut. Daddy. The name he had come to cherish, the role he had been so proud to play, and now, because of his own mistakes, he was losing it all. He dropped to his knees, his voice breaking. I'm sorry, Eliza. I'm so sorry. Tears streamed down Eliza's cheeks as she clung to Amara's leg, her small voice trembling. I don't want to go, Mommy. I want to stay with Daddy. Amara's face crumpled, her own tears falling as she bent down to hold her daughter. I know, baby. I know, but we can't stay here. We need to go. Jaxon reached out, his hand trembling as he touched Eliza's shoulder. I love you, Eliza. You'll always be my little girl. She looked at him, confusion and heartbreak clouding her innocent eyes. Then why aren't you coming with us? Jaxon choked on a sob, his heart breaking. Because I made a mistake, and I have to fix it. Amara stood, her face hardening once more. Goodbye, Jaxon. He watched as she opened the door, leading Eliza outside. He wanted to run after them, to beg her to stay, but his feet wouldn't move. He stood there, frozen in place as the door closed behind them, the echo reverberating through the empty mansion. The silence was deafening. Jaxon sank to the floor, his body trembling as sobs tore through him. He had lost them. He had lost everything, not because of fate or circumstance, but because of his own lies, his own selfishness. He cried until his chest ached, his heart shattered beyond repair. But even as the pain consumed him, one thought remained. He wouldn't give up. He couldn't give up. He would fight to earn back their trust, to prove that his love was real, even if it took the rest of his life. Even if he had to build a new life from the ground up, he would find a way to bring them home, because he couldn't imagine a life without Amara and Eliza. They were his world, his family, and he would do whatever it took to win them back, even if it meant becoming a man worthy of their love. Amara stood in the doorway, her heart pounding as she took in Jaxon's words. There he was, the man who had shattered her trust not once but twice, first with the factory closure that had destroyed her life, and then with the revelation of the bet that had made a mockery of her love. Yet here he stood, stripped of his power, his status, his wealth. For the first time since she'd met him, Jaxon looked vulnerable. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust the emotion in his voice, the plea in his eyes. But the pain of betrayal was still fresh, a wound that ran too deep to heal with words alone. You sold everything? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why? Jaxon's shoulders slumped, his gaze dropping to the ground. Because I couldn't live that life anymore, not after everything I did to you. I needed to break away from the man from the man who hurt you. I needed to prove that my love for you and Eliza is real. Amara's jaw tightened, her arms wrapping protectively around herself. You think giving up your company will fix everything? You lied to me, Jaxon. You made me believe you loved me, while our whole relationship was just some sick game to you. Jaxon's head snapped up, pain flashing in his eyes. It was never a game, Amara. Not after I got to know you. Not after I fell in love with you and Eliza. The bet... It was stupid and selfish, and I will regret it for the rest of my life, but what we had, what I feel for you, that was real. Amara's lips trembled, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. You let me believe in you. You let me fall in love with you, thinking you were someone who cared, someone who understood, but you were lying the whole time. Jaxon took a step forward, his hands trembling. I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid of losing you. And that fear made me a coward. But I can't live without you, Amara. I don't want to. I gave up everything because nothing matters to me more than you and Eliza. Not my company, not my reputation, nothing. Amara's breath caught in her throat, her heart aching as she looked at the man who had caused her so much pain. She could see the change in him, the raw vulnerability in his face, the sincerity in his voice, but she was scared. Scared to believe him again, scared to open herself up to more pain. "You can't just show up and expect me to forgive you," she said, her voice cracking. "You broke my trust, Jaxon. You broke my heart." Jackson's face crumpled, his own eyes glistening with tears. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn back your trust, if you'll let me. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I just want a chance to show you that I can be the man you deserve." Amara looked away, her vision blurring as the tears finally spilled over. Her heart was screaming at her, torn between love and betrayal, hope and fear. She had loved him, truly, deeply loved him. But he had lied, he had manipulated her trust, turned her life into a game for his own ego. Could she ever forgive that? She looked back at him, her eyes hardening. "I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you without remembering all the lies." Jackson's face fell, his shoulders sagging in defeat. "I understand, and if you can't, if you decide to walk away, I won't blame you, but I'll still fight for you. I'll still try to prove that I love you, because you and Eliza are everything to me." Amara's heart twisted painfully, her resolve wavering. She wanted to walk away, to protect herself from more pain, but her heart wouldn't let her. She had seen the good in him, the man he could be, the father he had become to Eliza, and she couldn't forget that love, no matter how hard she tried. She took a shaky breath, her voice breaking. "I need time, Jaxon. I need time to heal and to see if I can ever trust you again." Jaxon nodded, hope flickering in his eyes. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait, no matter how long it takes." Amara swallowed the lump in her throat, her heart aching. "I can't promise you anything, but maybe one day we can find a way to move forward." Jackson's eyes filled with gratitude, his voice trembling. "That's enough for me. Just knowing there's a chance, that's more than I deserve." Amara turned away, her shoulders shaking as she struggled to hold herself together. She needed to leave, to think, to breathe, but as she reached for the door, she felt Jackson's hand gently touch her arm. "Amara, I love you. I always will." Her heart broke at the sincerity in his voice, her tears falling freely. She looked back at him, her eyes full of pain. "Then prove it, Jaxon. Prove that you're the man I fell in love with, not the one who broke my heart." She pulled her arm away and walked out the door, leaving Jaxon standing alone, his heart shattered but filled with hope. He knew it wouldn't be easy. He knew he had a long road ahead of him. But he also knew that he was willing to fight for her, to fight for Eliza, to fight for the future he had dreamed of with them. Because Amara had given him the greatest gift of all, a chance at redemption, and he wouldn't waste it. Not this time, not ever again. The breeze was gentle that afternoon, rustling the leaves overhead as the sunlight danced between the branches. Amara watched Eliza play in the open field, her laughter ringing out with the pure joy only a child could feel. The scene was peaceful, simple, untainted by the complexities that lay between her and Jaxon. She glanced at him, sitting beside her on the park bench, his eyes fixed on Eliza with a soft expression that was both new and familiar. Jaxon looked different now. Lighter, somehow, without the weight of his title, his company, his status. He was just a man who had made mistakes, but who was trying to find redemption. Amara could see the change in his demeanor, the humility in his posture, the patience in his actions. But her heart was still guarded, wary of giving in too soon, of trusting too quickly. Jaxon turned to her, his gaze steady. "Thank you for coming today. I wasn't sure if you would." Amara looked down at her hands, fingers nervously twisting together. "I almost didn't, but Eliza misses you, and honestly, so do I." Her admission hung in the air, fragile and exposed. Jackson's breath caught, his heart pounding. "Amara, I miss you both, more than you could ever know." They sat in silence for a moment, watching Eliza chase after a butterfly, her face alight with wonder. Jackson's voice was soft when he spoke again. "I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust, and I don't expect things to just go back to the way they were. But I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust." Amara looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any trace of deceit, but all she saw was sincerity. "You've changed," she admitted quietly. Since you sold the company. You're not the same man who made that bet." Jackson's shoulders sagged with relief, his eyes filling with gratitude. "I didn't just sell the company to prove something to you, Amara. I did it because I couldn't live that life anymore. I couldn't be that man, the man who only cared about power, about winning. You showed me there's more to life than that. You and Eliza, you gave me something worth fighting for." Amara's eyes softened, her voice trembling. "I want to believe you, Jaxon, I really do, but I'm scared. I'm scared of getting hurt again, of letting you in only to find out it was all just another lie." Jaxon reached out, his hand hovering inches from hers before he pulled back, respecting her boundaries. "I understand, and I won't push you. I'll wait as long as it takes, because you're worth it. You and Eliza are worth everything to me." Amara looked away, her vision blurring as tears threatened to spill over. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the man he was trying to become, but her heart was fragile, scarred from all the lies, and she didn't know if she could survive another betrayal. Jackson's voice broke through her thoughts, quiet and vulnerable. "I love you, Amara. I've loved you from the moment I stopped seeing you as a challenge and started seeing you as the woman who changed my life." Amara's breath hitched, her heart fluttering painfully. "Why didn't you tell me about the bet?" Jackson's face fell, shame washing over him. "Because I was a coward. I was so afraid of losing you that I kept lying, even when I knew it was wrong. I kept thinking I could fix it, that if I just kept loving you, it would all go away. But I was wrong. I should have told you the truth from the beginning." Amara wiped away a tear, her voice trembling. "You broke my heart, Jaxon. You made me fall in love with a man who didn't exist." Jackson's chest tightened, his own eyes filling with tears. "I know, and I hate myself for that. But I'm trying to be that man now, the man you deserve. I'm trying to be real, for you and for Eliza." Amara looked at him, seeing the raw vulnerability in his face, the desperation in his eyes. It broke her heart to see him like this, to see the man she had loved so deeply laid bare before her, stripped of all his defenses. But it also gave her hope, hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to heal. "I can't promise you anything," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I can't promise that I'll ever forgive you, but I'm willing to try." Jackson's eyes widened, his face lighting up with hope. "That's all I need, just a chance to prove that I love you." Amara looked away, her heart pounding as she watched Eliza run back toward them, her little face glowing with excitement. Eliza deserves a father who loves her, a father who's honest and real. If you can be that man, then maybe we can find a way to move forward. Jaxon felt his heart swell, his chest tightening with emotion. "I swear to you, Amara, I will be that man. I will be the father Eliza deserves, and the man you can trust." Amara looked back at him, her eyes filled with pain and hope, fear and love. "Then prove it, Jaxon. Not with words, but with actions." Jaxon nodded, his voice breaking. "I will, I promise you, I will." Eliza ran up to them, her face beaming as she threw herself into Jackson's arms. "Daddy, I caught the butterfly, did you see?" Jaxon hugged her tightly, his heart breaking and healing all at once. "I saw, sweetheart. You were amazing." Amara watched them, her heart aching as she saw the love in Jackson's eyes, the joy in Eliza's laughter. It was a fragile hope, a tentative step toward rebuilding what had been broken. But it was a start. As the sun began to set, bathing the park in golden light, Amara stood beside Jaxon, watching Eliza play, her heart torn between fear and love. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if she would ever fully forgive him. But for the first time, she felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to heal. Together. The months that followed were a delicate dance of healing and rebuilding. It wasn't easy. There were days when the old wounds resurfaced, when Amara's heart clenched with the memory of Jackson's betrayal. But each time the doubt crept in, Jaxon was there, steady and patient, never pushing, always ready to listen. He had changed, and Amara could see it not just in his words but in his actions. Jaxon became a constant presence in their lives, but he was careful not to overstep. He showed up at Eliza's school plays, cheered at her soccer games, and even volunteered for class projects, earning the admiration of her teachers and the love of her classmates. His commitment wasn't just to Amara and Eliza, it was to the community he had once wronged. He continued his work with the support fund, pouring his time and resources into helping the families affected by the factory closure. He met with them regularly, listened to their struggles, and worked alongside them to rebuild the town's economy. He didn't do it for recognition or redemption, but because it was the right thing to do. It was his way of proving to himself that he was no longer the man who had caused so much pain. Amara watched him from a distance, her heart softening with each act of kindness, each genuine smile he gave to the people he was helping. She could see the difference in his eyes, the way they lit up with purpose, the way he laughed more freely, the way he seemed lighter, as if the burden of his past was finally beginning to lift. It gave her hope, fragile but growing, that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward. One evening, as they sat together on her porch watching Eliza play with her friends, Amara turned to Jaxon, her voice hesitant. "You've really changed, haven't you?" Jaxon looked at her, his expression earnest. "I'm trying to be a better man, Amara. Not just for you, not just for Eliza, but for myself. I don't ever want to go back to the man I used to be." Amara's heart clenched, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I see that. And I'm proud of you." The words took Jaxon by surprise, his chest tightening with emotion. "You have no idea how much that means to me." Amara smiled, the warmth of her affection breaking through the barriers she had built around her heart. "I'm learning to trust you again, Jaxon, but I need you to promise me, no more secrets." Jaxon reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "No more secrets. I swear to you, Amara, I will always be honest from now on. No more lies, no more games." She looked down at their intertwined fingers, her heart pounding. "I want to believe you, and I want to try again, not just for Eliza's sake, but because I still love you." Jaxon's breath caught, his heart swelling with hope. "I love you too, Amara, more than I ever thought I could love anyone." Amara looked up at him, her eyes shining. "Then let's take it one day at a time, slowly, carefully, but together." Jaxon felt tears prick at his eyes, his voice breaking. "I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll do whatever it takes." They sat there in the golden light of the setting sun, the past still lingering but no longer defining them. They were taking the first steps toward a future they were finally ready to build. Together. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Jaxon continued to prove himself, not just to Amara, but to the community. He became a mentor to the children in the neighborhood, helping with homework, organizing sports events, and teaching them the value of hard work and integrity. He never missed an opportunity to show up for Eliza, becoming the father figure she had always needed. They built pillow forts in the living room, had movie nights with popcorn fights, and went on long walks where Eliza chattered endlessly about her dreams and adventures. Jaxon listened to every word, his heart overflowing with love for the little girl who had become his world. One evening, after putting Eliza to bed, Jaxon found Amara standing by the window, looking out at the moonlit garden. He walked up beside her, his voice soft. "Are you okay?" Amara smiled, her eyes reflecting the silver moonlight. "Yes, for the first time in a long while, I am." Jaxon's heart raced, his voice trembling. "I never thought I'd get to see you smile like that again." Amara turned to face him, her expression tender. "You earned it. You showed me that you're willing to fight for us. You proved to me that you're not just words, you're actions." Jaxon's eyes filled with emotion, his hand reaching up to touch her face. "I would give up everything just to see you smile." Amara leaned into his touch, her heart finally letting go of the pain. "You already did." Jaxon's breath caught as she closed the distance between them, her lips brushing softly against his. It was gentle, hesitant, a promise of a new beginning. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, his heart pounding with the realization that she was giving him another chance. A chance he would never take for granted. They stood there in the moonlight, wrapped in each other's embrace, the shadows of the past fading into the night. It wouldn't be easy. There would still be challenges, still be scars that needed healing, but for the first time, they were facing it together, ready to rebuild what had been broken. A new chapter was beginning, one built on trust, honesty, and love. And this time, they would get it right. The snow fell softly outside, blanketing the world in white as laughter echoed from within Jaxon's home. It was no longer the grand mansion it once was, but it was filled with warmth, love, and the scent of freshly baked gingerbread. Amara stood by the kitchen doorway, watching Eliza tear open her presents with wide-eyed wonder, her giggles lighting up the room. Jaxon sat beside her, his eyes twinkling as he helped untangle ribbons and bows, his heart full in a way he had never known before. Amara felt a lump rise in her throat as she watched them together. It was hard to believe how much had changed, how far they had come. She could see the genuine love in Jaxon's eyes, the way he looked at Eliza as if she were his own flesh and blood. There was no trace of the man who had once been consumed by pride and power. This Jaxon was kind, humble, patient, and she loved him more deeply than she had ever thought possible. She walked over to join them, sitting beside Jaxon as Eliza held up her favorite present, her face glowing. "Look, Mommy, it's the dollhouse I always wanted." Amara smiled, her eyes meeting Jaxon's. "It's perfect, honey. Why don't you show Daddy how it works?" Eliza's face lit up as she grabbed Jaxon's hand, pulling him to the floor. "Come on, Daddy, let's play." Words still brought tears to Jaxon's eyes. Daddy. It was the title he had never thought he deserved, yet Eliza had given it to him freely, with all the love and trust in her little heart. He followed her to the play area, his laughter mingling with hers as they played together, building stories in the miniature world she loved so much. Amara watched them, her heart full, her fears finally easing. The man she had once hated had become the man she loved, the man who had proven himself worthy of her trust. She knew it hadn't been easy. They had walked through fire, faced the ghosts of the past, and rebuilt from the ashes. But they had done it together, and now they were stronger for it. As the evening wore on, and Eliza fell asleep in Jaxon's arms, Amara guided them to the sofa, helping tuck a blanket around her daughter. They sat together, their faces close, their hearts beating in sync. Jaxon turned to her, his voice a whisper. "Amara, I never thought I could be this happy. You and Eliza, you're my everything." Amara leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. "I never thought I could forgive you, but you proved me wrong, every single day." Jaxon wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "I'll keep proving it, every day, for the rest of my life." Amara looked up, her eyes shimmering. "I believe you, I love you." He kissed her softly, his heart bursting with gratitude and love. "I love you too." The days that followed were filled with simple joys, morning pancakes, bedtime stories, family walks, and laughter that filled their home. Jaxon found happiness in the little things, Eliza's hugs, Amara's smile, the warmth of family dinners. He continued his work with the community, dedicating his time and resources to rebuilding the lives he had once impacted. Amara joined him, using her experiences to help other women find hope and strength. A year later, on a warm spring afternoon, Jaxon stood before Amara once more, his heart racing as he took her hand. This time, there were no secrets, no lies, no bets, just love. They stood beneath a canopy of flowers, surrounded by close friends and family. Eliza was the flower girl, her laughter echoing as she scattered petals along the aisle. Amara looked stunning, her eyes filled with love as she walked toward Jaxon, her heart full and free. When she reached him, he took her hands, his voice trembling with emotion. "Amara, from the moment you walked into my life, everything changed. You showed me what it meant to truly live, to truly love. I vow to spend every day making up for the mistakes I've made, and to be the husband and father you and Eliza deserve." Amara's eyes sparkled with tears. "Jaxon, you showed me that people can change, that love is worth fighting for. I vow to stand by you, to love you and to trust you, just as you've shown me that I can." They exchanged rings, sealing their vows with a kiss that was met with cheers and applause. It was a promise of forever, a promise built on truth, forgiveness, and love. Life was beautifully ordinary after that. They built a home filled with laughter and love. Jaxon dedicated himself to his family, his community, and his new purpose in life. He was no longer the powerful CEO, no longer the man who needed wealth and status to feel important. He was a husband, a father, a man who had finally found himself. One morning, as they sat together at the breakfast table, Amara reached across, taking his hand. "I have news." Jaxon looked up, his heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" Amara's eyes were bright with excitement, her smile radiant. "We're having a baby." Jackson's breath caught, his eyes widening in shock and joy. We're having a baby?" Amara nodded, tears shimmering. "Yes." Jackson's face broke into a smile, his laughter bubbling up as he pulled her into his arms. "Amara, I can't believe it, we're having a baby." Eliza clapped her hands, her face glowing with excitement. "I'm going to be a big sister." Jackson's heart swelled, his eyes filling with tears as he held his family close. It was more than he had ever dreamed of, more than he had ever deserved. But he knew without a doubt that he would spend the rest of his life proving himself worthy of the love he had been given. 9 months later, they welcomed their baby, a beautiful boy with Jackson's eyes and Amara's smile. Jaxon held him for the first time, his heart bursting with love as he whispered, "I will never let you down, I promise." Amara watched him, her heart full as she saw the man she loved, the man who had fought for her, for Eliza, and for the life they had built together. She took his hand, her voice breaking. "Thank you for proving I was right to believe in you." Jaxon looked at her, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for giving me the chance to be a better man." They stood together, holding their son, their family complete. They had faced the darkness, the pain, the betrayal. They had fought for love, for forgiveness, for each other, and they had won. As the snow began to fall outside their window, Jaxon pulled Amara close, his heart full and his soul at peace. He had lost everything once, his pride, his wealth, his status, but in the end he had gained the only thing that truly mattered, a family built on love, trust, and the promise of forever. What do you think? Did Amara make the right decision? Would you have done the same in her shoes? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more narratives of love, redemption, and second chances. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey with us.